who says that the Bible is no longer relevant in today's society. It's sort of an antiquated history of a life and times that isn't actually applicable today, especially when they see the church divided on so many issues like homosexuality.
Okay, there's a lot in there. One of them is the idea that if something is ancient, it's not relevant. That's one assumption that goes on there. The way you challenge that is by pointing out that it's false. For example, was Plato's claim in the Republic that women should be allowed to hold office alongside men irrelevant to today society? But that's an ancient document, it's antiquated. Was the claim that you should not murder people made in the Bible, is that irrelevant to today? Right? Obviously not. Right? So that's the first thing that's going on there. The second thing about division, I think the claim about division is a red herring for two reasons. Firstly, I think the amount of division amongst Christian churches, if you look at the official creedal statements they make, is actually exaggerated. For example, if you look at the Westminster Confession next to the Catechism of the Catholic Church and put that next to the statements of the Lutheran Church, you'd find there's huge agreement. What is often disagreement in the church is about people who believe the creedal statements and don't. Between the liberals and the evangelicals is often over that. The second point that I'd make about that is the claim is that if the Christian church is divided, it lacks credibility. Well, what I usually respond and say, okay, so is the secular world unified? When I study philosophy, I could find atheists who believe abortion is wrong, and I could find atheists who believe abortion is right. I could find social Darwinists, I could find Marxists, I could find libertarians, I could find hundreds of, if you like, secular sects. So why should you reject a religious view of the world because these religions are all divided, and then adopt a secular view of the world, the secular world is divided? So again, I think there's a case going on there where the person is applying a stand to the Christian faith. They demand unity before they believe in it when it's Christian. And in fact, their claim itself, there must be unity on a belief before you accept it. That's not a claim that there is unity on. Right? So again, the person is putting up a standard, measuring the Christian faith by that standard, when their own beliefs don't meet that standard, and the basis for their own beliefs don't meet that standard. So instead of trying to sort of apologise for division, or division is a bad thing, I would say, well, hang on, is there a position that if a group of people who hold a belief are divided, or don't agree on everything, that their fundamental philosophy is mistaken? Can you find me a philosophy where everyone who holds it does agree on everything? And if they say no, or say you're saying you shouldn't believe in anything. And if they go yes, well, why do you believe that? Right? So yeah, it's the same basic strategy.
I'd like to have you in my pocket. So when it comes to these arguments, I just pull you out and you deal with it.
A lot of this stuff actually is stuff that, I have a PhD in theology and a master's in philosophy, and my PhD was in the interface between philosophy and theology, so I've probably read a lot more than most people on this one. But there is a lot of stuff that, even lay people can kind of read and is accessible and give you some ideas of the kinds of things that you're going to encounter. One book that's particularly good is a book called Reason for the Hope Within, which is probably the best sort of accessible text that I've found on apologetics for lay people. And the reason I think it's the best is that often with the literature on apologetics, what you end up with is this kind of divide. You get the academics, some people like that who are fantastically rigorous, but most of you couldn't understand it. Because it requires a certain amount of understanding of background and what have you, and it's written in a very accessible way. And then you get people who are like pastors who think, oh, I know about apologetics and really don't. And they say things and Christians think, oh, I can understand them, that's wonderful. And what that does is it gets them so far and it gets you killed, if you want to benefit that. But the reason for the hope within, which is good, is they've got a lot of top level people and say, let's have a conference for lay people. And they look at a series of different objections. So let's get a conference where you speak to lay people and present your findings on this topic to lay people. So have this conference, and it's basically the proceedings of the conference. So here's all these people who are very academically rigorous, but they've come to a conference where it's assumed that everyone in the conference doesn't have all the background, and they'll just articulate it in a kind of accessible manner. And for that reason, it's one of the best books that I've read. Another one that's quite good is actually Timothy Keller's book, Reason to God. I picked that up this year and I was very surprised by it. Keller is he's a Presbyterian minister in New York, and it's a very popular little book, and it's written in a very kind of colloquial, almost like sermons, but apparently Keller reads the sort of really heavy intellectual people and then makes them accessible to people in his sermons. And so I was quite surprised because he began citing all these people. I thought, he's actually citing really good people and making it really accessible. And he's having a lot of success in New York with this. So that's another kind of book which you can kind of really get a handle on some of these things at the kind of level you're likely to work. So if I was recommending two, those would be the basic two.
I was curious. I haven't really got such a question on well thought out. How can people argue for right and wrong when there is no God and technically there's almost no point of right and wrong because it really comes from the Bible? So, I mean, how can you say this is right and that's wrong when if you're not basing it on a belief network?
Well, what happens is there's what I call moral phenomena, to excuse the word, and that's basically the experience we have in morality. You know, we hear of a terrible rape or a terrible genocide or something like that, and our immediate gut reaction is that is wrong. Okay? And so the common sense way of responding to that is to say that there's such thing as right and wrong, and it's real and it exists. Right? So the question comes about, if you're a Christian and you believe in God, you can make sense out of that because you believe that there is a mind independently of human beings. And it seems kind of plausible, I think, to suggest that values are somehow linked importantly to mind. You know, values are linked to emotion, will. So when I say something's wrong, I'm not just describing the fact about it, I'm also directing, expressing a desire that it not be done. Right? And so Christians can make sense out of that. Now, if you remove God from the picture, that creates a problem that needs to be solved. And so atheists try and solve it in various different ways. One way is to try and say, yes, there are moral facts, and they actually are really scientific things like space-time matter, and they try and find some plausible account of how you do that. The problem that line seems to take is it seems to take away the motivational element of a moral claim. When I say a claim is wrong, if I said, you know, Catherine is wrong for you to leave the door open, right, you'd go up, walk to the door and shut it, because you would interpret what I'm saying as expressing a desire or expression of the will to shut the door. But if I said, Catherine, the door is 6 feet tall, right, you wouldn't take that line. So there seems to be a difference between a natural fact of the world and a moral claim. So often what they end up doing is denying that kind of element of moral discourse. The other way is to say that, in fact, moral claims aren't real, they're just expressions of our desires. You know, those are the two sort of lines. And then it be more radical and suggest that in reality, that whole perception we have of reality is just a kind of trick that's played by us. So really there is no such thing as right and wrong. But we, because of evolution guided by nothing, it becomes in our best interest to believe there is something right and wrong. So that's something that evolution has passed down as an illusion. Okay. So there are different ways they try and solve the problem. The question is whether they're adequate, or more importantly, whether they are as adequate or as robust as the Christian ones. I don't think they are. But you know, there are various different ways. But you run some atheists who just say the right ones exist. You know, a professor I had something to do with at Otago had spent his career defending his view. He used to get up and say, I believe that rape is wrong, and I also believe that all kinds of faith. My philosophical career was to try and solve that, make sense of that, because God doesn't exist. And I sort of said, what a fool, why don't you see God exists? And what is the problem?